All right, so in this video, I'm going to be comparing the Massdrop, and they just rebranded their name to Drop. So if I say Massdrop or Drop, it both references the same thing. Drop, if you're listening to this, why did you rebrand? Really strange decision. But I'll be comparing the Massdrop X Sennheiser HE4XX Jubilee headphones against the Massdrop X HifiMan HE4XX planar magnetic headphones. And I'm comparing these because, first off, I own both pairs. They're in a very, very similar price range, and they're both different in the reasons that you might want these. So if you, like me, spend a lot of time at your computer working or just messing around, having a really good pair of headphones can make everything much more enjoyable, especially if you listen to music all the time. It's a really big perk as you're working through stuff. But first off, let's cover some of the basics here. So both of these are not cheap headphones, but not super expensive headphones in terms of what headphones can cost. So this pair, the Massdrop X HifiMan HE4XXs, I'll just call them 4XXs in this video to keep it more simple, but they're $180 if you're in the US, and the Sennheiser HD58Xs are $160, so just a little bit more cheap, but I'd call both of these quite comparable. And what is Massdrop or Drop, the website that these are found on? Essentially, it's a place for people to do group buys. Kind of think like a Kickstarter, just a bit more official. So you can buy things upfront before they're produced and then save some money, or after they're released, you can buy them whenever if Massdrop happens to produce them themselves, like they do for both of these pairs. Also, for both of these pairs, I purchased them myself. They weren't given to me for review purposes, so there won't be any weird bias when it comes to that. And I will also link both of these pairs of headphones in the description, where if you're not a member of Drop or Massdrop already, if you click that link, I think you get $10 to spend there, so it's like a slight discount. And I also would get $10 if you purchase the headphones for me to spend there. So it's sort of an everybody wins situation if you use my link, but if you don't want to, that's cool too. I'm sure you can just search these on Google and find them that way as well. But let's talk about some of the really baseline differences. So both of these headphones, as you can see here, you can see through the back. And then you can see through the back, not quite as well on this one because there's some foam behind there, but these are called open back headphones, which means they're not closed off on the sides. There's air that can travel through to the speaker. And the benefit of this is that sounds tend to sound much more wide, expansive, like you're in a larger room as opposed to in a closet. The downside is you'll be able to hear people through your headphones. They don't isolate or remove sound like sound canceling headphones do. And also other people will be able to listen to what you're listening to. Obviously not as well, but they will be able to hear sounds coming out of your headphones. So before you think about either one of these pairs, just be aware of that. That's a thing with open back headphones. But a lot of the best headphones in the world are open back for the benefits they provide. And for me, that's really a non-issue, so I'm more than happy to get the benefits without having to worry about other people hearing me or me hearing them. And also, there's a pretty stark difference between these two headphones too in terms of the way that they work. So depending on how well you can see this on the screen, these headphones are planar magnetics. So you can see these strips here that look kind of like long rectangles inside of this. I don't know if you can see that in the video or not. But if you can, those are arrays of magnets. So there's multiple magnets being used to basically manipulate the speaker into making sounds. And why does that matter? On a pair of headphones like this, they're called dynamic headphones, which if you think of almost any speaker, there tends to be a really big magnet just stuck on the back, on the circular portion that's typically made out of metal, where on the front side you have the actual speaker itself. And the benefit of using a dynamic speaker like these is that it's cheaper to produce, it's easier to produce. It also takes less energy to drive or power that particular speaker, much, much less complicated to manufacture. Where something like a planar magnetic, with all these magnets, it's more difficult to manufacture. It also generally takes more power to make that headphone sound really good. But because there's a lot more magnets that are spread out much further across the speaker, it has a really cool effect with how things sound. And we'll definitely talk about that in the overall review of both these headphones. But that's a key difference between these two. One's a dynamic pair of headphones, one's a planar pair of headphones. One isn't objectively better than the other in terms of how things are done. Although I will say a lot of the most high-end headphones in the world tend to be planar magnetic because of some of those awesome benefits. And it also makes the price point of $180 fairly compelling for a nice pair of planar magnetic headphones. It's not uncommon for really nice pairs to be $1,000 plus. although I'm not saying that these are directly comparable to those. But just to jump into some of the key things you might be concerned about if you're considering either one of these pairs, first up, let's go with comfort. If you're wearing a pair of headphones for a really long time, you want them to be comfortable. And I will say up front, both of these pairs of headphones are extremely comfortable. On this one, the ear pads themselves are completely velour. I think that's how you say it. If not, make fun of me. But it's super soft. It's really breathable, so your head won't get sweaty, which is always a big bonus. And these are actually a combination where the outside is a fake leather of some sort, I'd assume. And then the inside, the part that actually touches your head, is then velour. So the benefit of that is it isolates sound a little bit better because sound doesn't come out of the leather or the fake leather part as well, but it's still very comfortable. Where on this one, the whole thing is the velour. So sound can get out a bit better, but it also tends to harm bass just a little bit in comparison to this style of headphone because it's isolating that sound in your ears much more intensely, so to speak. Although I will say when it comes to the actual review, we'll cover how bass and openness of sound tend to work across these two headphones. I will say for me personally, I find the 4XXs to be much more comfortable. And it's largely because the pads are super squishy. They're very, very comfortable themselves. But the bigger deal for me is that these have a much less strong clamp on my head. They don't clamp down quite as hard, so it doesn't feel like my head is being squeezed. Whereas on the 58Xs, the pads are super duper soft, really breathable. Overall, they're extremely comfortable headphones, but the clamp is much more strong, so it feels like they're pressing against my head a bit harder. So that's why I think the 4XXs are largely more comfortable, although I'll say they're both comfortable and I don't think comfort will be a problem for you if you purchase either one of these. Also, build quality. So when you pay this much for a pair of headphones, you're going to hope that they're made fairly well. And I'll talk through some pros and cons to both of these. So with these 4XXs, the build quality overall is really good, and that largely has to do with the way the materials are made. So you have plastic for the earphones or the ear cups, and then metal to attach those, both around here, and then this bar is also made out of metal. The part here that goes around your head is a leather or a fake leather, I'm not sure which one of the two. It's somewhat squishy, not super squishy, but also quite comfortable. And also, this particular pair of headphones, in comparison to this pair of headphones, did not paint the plastic. I'm pretty sure the plastic is just raw plastic, and I actually think that looks much, much, much better. And we'll talk about that on the 58Xs on the other page when we get to it. And I'll say overall, the materials on this pair of headphones seem to be a bit better with the actual, like the fake leather here. Also on the ear pads itself, there's more metal on this particular pair of headphones, but there are a few problems with at least my pair. On my pair, one of the two earphone parts doesn't swivel well at all. It's on there too tight. So this whole ear pad portion is designed to swivel left and right so it fits in your head better. On mine, one swivels super well, the other one doesn't swivel super well, so that's a bit annoying. Also, the way these are designed to raise or lower the height of the headphones overall in your head, it's kind of sticky, and it also doesn't hold its position as well as the Sennheisers do. So I would have said that these would win the build quality for me fairly easily if those two issues didn't happen on my pair of headphones, but those issues did happen on my pair of headphones, so they might happen on yours too. Worth being mindful of. The company that made these, HifiMan, is sort of well known for having QC or quality control issues. I haven't run into anything serious. I own more than just this pair of HifiMan headphones because they're actually a really excellent brand for the quality versus what you're paying. But just be mindful, you might run into some issues with yours. And if you do, you can always send them back and get a different pair in return. Now with the Sennheisers, my biggest gripe is that they painted these a really glossy black. It looks pretty great on this photo. It doesn't look as great in person because, as most people who have painted things glossy black before know, it's by far the easiest color in the world to make imperfections show. Also, it's super prone to showing things like fingerprints as you touch them. And because of that, I wish the entire pair of headphones was just raw plastic and it wasn't painted this super glossy black. For example, on the bottom portion where this attaches to the speaker here, this is raw plastic that isn't painted as opposed to the glossy plastic above it. And I just think it looks much better. It doesn't get thumbprints. It doesn't show the imperfections of the plastic molds. It just looks higher quality for whatever reason to me. But outside of that one thing, these headphones are overall made really well. This one has much more plastic on it, but it doesn't feel super cheap at any point in time, so it's really a non-issue to me, and that's why I think the build quality is roughly a toss-up. But all of that is ultimately pretty superficial because what you likely care about is how do these sound. I mean, after all, we buy headphones to listen to things. So what I did is I found 5 different fairly diverse songs, and I just listened to these back and forth constantly, where I'd listen to one song for about a minute on a pair of headphones, and I'd plop those off and put on the other pair, listen about a minute, and do that several times per each one of these songs to try to figure out which one I thought sounded better and what were the differences in terms of how they sounded, because these 2 headphones sound very, very different. I'll say they both sound great, but they're very, very different in terms of what they'll do for you. So I'll run through these 5 different songs, talk through my thoughts on them. Obviously, the way something sounds is super subjective. It's up to the person to decide what they like, but I'll do my best to be as objective as possible and explain what I was listening to, what I found to be interesting about each pair, and which pair I thought won, so to speak, on that particular song. So for the first song, we have Cello Suite Number 1 in G major, and that's by Bach, and it's also played by Yo-Yo Ma. And I think on the actual video, I'll just throw an image of that particular album cover in case you want to go on Spotify or whatever else you use to listen to music and check it out yourself. And I picked these songs because I think they each bring out something special when it comes to what you're listening to. There's something unique about them that will help separate the differences between these headphones. So with this particular song, it's just one cello, played by maybe one of the greatest cello players of all time, which is Yo-Yo Ma. Not everyone's really into classical music, but sometimes if I'm working, it's great chill music to just focus on the work as opposed to focus on the song itself. And I'll just jump into it from there. So for the 58X, it was much more noticeable in the powerful highs or treble. So the really high-pitched sounds are much, much more powerful coming from the 58Xs, which is interesting because when I first bought the 4XXs, the HifiMan 4XXs on this particular page, I thought the treble was a bit intense or overpowering, but as I listened to them more and more and the speakers kind of opened up a bit, it became much more subdued. So the 58X actually has much more powerful highs when it comes to that particular song, but it also lacked depth in the low end, and I'm not saying it lacked bass overall, like it has a lot of strong bass, but it wasn't as detailed. It didn't sound quite as special as the 4XXs did. So what I wrote down was not as nuanced and not as detailed, which just took something away from the song a little bit. Also, these don't have as much soundstage as the 4XXs. And soundstage is, think about the size of a room in which you're listening to music. So you can listen to music in your closet, in which case it's going to be really intense. The music's going to be like right there, trapped in a small space with you. That's much closer to the 58Xs. As opposed to the 4XXs, it sounds like you're in a much larger room, as if the music is filling up this wider space. And that's referred to as soundstage. And both of these are open back headphones like I talked about before, so they will have much more soundstage, generally speaking, than closed back headphones, which if you want to Google a pair of closed back headphones, like Audio-Technica M40Xs are closed back headphones, where almost by default, because the backs are closed off, they're going to sound like a much, much smaller, tighter room than either one of these two would. But I'm comparing these against each other and not a pair of closed backs. So in that case, the 4XX has a much wider soundstage. And then switching here to the 4XXs on this particular song, it's a much more subdued sound overall. It's not as intense. And that might be because it feels like you're just listening in a little bit of a bigger room. It just sounds softer overall. And also, since this is a cello song, the vibrancy in the strings, like the way you can hear that actual string vibrating as the person plays the cello, is just much more special. It's really hard to describe exactly how that difference sounds, but it's like a core benefit of planar magnetic headphones is there's something very special about the energy that they can convey because there's more magnets to manipulate the speaker in a different way. So there's just something very, very special when it comes to orchestral music. And that's why I picked this particular song to compare these two, because I knew that would happen with this particular pair of headphones. So very, very vibrant and a very, very special sound in the strings. Also, it's extremely open. It sounds like you're in a much bigger, more open space when you're listening to this song, which I think is a solid benefit for anything classical. Also, really excellent bass and low end, where it's just more detailed for whatever reason. And I think that goes back to these being planar magnetics as well. They have an energy to the bass that just sets it apart from the 58Xs. So which one of these two pairs of headphones do I prefer for this particular song? For me, it was a pretty easy winner. I think they're both excellent, but the 4XXs, just by far and away, if you're listening to classical music, I think this is the way to do it. It conveyed a lot more emotion, which is kind of like a weird thing to say, but I didn't really feel much while listening to that song on this pair of headphones. I thought it sounded excellent, but there was something special with this pair of headphones. It just much more enjoyable for me to listen to. I felt like I could understand how the person was feeling that was playing the music. Also, the sound is just much more delicate and expressive of the moving strings, and that just made this an easy win. Not all these songs were an easy win to pick one or the other. On this song, easy win for the 4XXs. So the second of 5 songs, which is The Veldt, 8-minute edit by Deadmau5. And why pick a Deadmau5 song? Basically, if you like electronic music, I'm sure you've heard of Deadmau5, maybe you've heard of him otherwise, but he produces, at least to my best of knowledge, almost everything from analog, as opposed to producing everything digitally on a computer, which just gives his music a really, really special flair that makes it easily some of my favorite electronic music out there. And this particular song is super duper magical. I love listening to it, so it was an easy pick for me. So, with the 58Xs on that particular song, extremely crisp sound, much, much more crisp than the 4XXs. So it's more detailed. It's easier to separate all the things apart, but it did lack a special sparkling energy that the 4XXs have. It also had a noticeably smaller soundstage, not as expansive, but a much more intense sound. So like I said before, it's like you're in a smaller room, so it doesn't sound as wide, it doesn't sound as big, but it does sound more intense because you're closer to it. Also, much more impactful bass than the 4XXs on this particular song, and also much sharper highs, so more treble. And I'll say that it was a bit too much in this particular song for me. I thought it was too intense. And then when it comes to the 4XXs, extremely vibrant sound and lots of energy to that sound. A word to describe it is like it sparkles. There's something like 10% extra that separates it apart from the 58Xs. Also, it lacked the detail of the 58X, just much more subdued. Overall, the sound from the 4XXs are more chill and just relaxed. It's not as intense in your face. And I'll say pretty much always a more wide soundstage is viewed as a benefit, not a hindrance. But picking a winner here was actually very, very difficult. If I were to listen to that song for a long period of time, I would always want to listen to the 4XXs. It's just a much more chill, relaxing way to listen as opposed to the 58Xs. But if I'm being as fair as I can be here, I think the 58X wins. It was as much more intense than the 4XXs and much, much more crisp. So it didn't have the same sparkle, it didn't have the same energy, but overall better separation of sound, more detailed sound, and also just really in your face in this particular song. So like I said, for my personal listening tastes, I'd probably pick the 4XXs, but if I'm trying to be objective about which one did a better job of actually reproducing this song, I think the 58Xs did that. Next song, we have Best Day Ever by Mac Miller. And why Mac Miller? Basically because stoner rap is awesome to listen to if you're trying to get really interesting sounds out of the way they produced it. And I think this song from Mac Miller is an excellent example of that. And he's also just a crazy talented dude. I think the world lost somebody special when he died way too young. It was super sad. But as far as the actual song here, the 58X, noticeably more crisp vocals. Also, the treble was much more powerful, like noticeably more powerful on the high end of things, the really high-pitched sounds you're hearing. The separation of sounds was excellent. You could clearly articulate the differences in things that were being played, where the 4XX kind of muddles or mutes them together a bit more, which gives it the more mellow or relaxed feeling. But when it comes to being really accurate to the way that song was produced, the 58X wins pretty easily there. When it comes to the 4XX, and it's so weird to say 58X and then 4XX. I wish their naming convention wasn't so damn similar between these headphones. But the 4XX was much more muted overall, not as crisp. So it's like if you're listening to the radio or a speaker and you just crank down that treble a little bit and everything chills out. That's a benefit of the 4XX. Or it could be a hindrance of the 4XX depending on how intense you want things to be. But the benefit here is it's very mellow, very chilled out. And then the soundstage in this, once again, was noticeably better. So the 58X, kind of like you're listening in your closet. This one, you're listening in a bedroom. Just a more wide sound that made me feel a little bit more immersed. So the winner here, I decided it was largely a toss-up because you have to decide what you're looking for. I'd say since this particular song is pure stoner rap, I think the 4XX is the right pair of headphones to listen to. It's much more chill. Also, there's a special vibrancy or energy to the sound that the 58X lacked. It just pushes it into this more special zone of like, ooh, like this is different than other pairs of headphones I've listened to. This is different than how this would sound if I was listening to it in my car. And I think that difference is really special when it comes to this pair of headphones. But if you do want the sound to be more intense, then the 58X is much more objective to that particular song. You can hear everything separated better. You can hear the differences between the vocals, the music that's playing. All those details come out much, much better with this pair of headphones. So it's up to you which one you want. Do you want mellow, chill, relaxed with like a special energy to it? Or do you want super objective? Then you get the 58X. Next song. So a big divergence from Mac Miller. We have Can't You Hear Me Knocking by the Rolling Stones. And why pick that song? A, because Can't You Hear Me Knocking might be the greatest of all time rhythm guitar part, at least in my opinion. Keith Richards, an amazing, amazing guitar player, and this song really emphasizes why he's so darn amazing. Outside of that, it's a really raw recording. It's 70s music. It was done all analog in the recording. I'm sure when they mastered it, it was just 2 studio monitors in that room as they were listening back. So I thought it'd be an interesting contrast between the 58X and the 4XX because they each handle that sort of stuff way differently. So when it comes to the 58X, a great separation of sound and everything was super crisp and detailed, which is a theme when it comes to all these songs. Also really great vocals, very crisp, very clear. It stood out. Powerful vocals on this pair of headphones. Also great imaging. And imaging is the ability to hear basically sounds from your left ear, your right ear, and then the ability for the headphones to project those sounds anywhere in between. So the better the imaging, the better it can be like this voice is right in front of me or straight to the left or in between those two or anywhere in between those. So imaging is a really good thing to have on headphones, and the imaging on that song and this pair of headphones was excellent. Also, I wrote down excellent sound for this type of music. It feels like I'm listening to the song the way it was intended to be heard. So once again, these are very objective headphones. You're going to listen to the song very close to how it was recorded, and I think that's a really decent benefit of these particular headphones. Also, I noted the bass was near perfect sounding, really crisp, really clear. I thought it was a great match for this song. And in comparison, we have the 4XXs, where I wrote, this is more muted, toned down, and also very chill. It had a much wider soundstage, which was great. And then the reverb or the echo on that particular song sounded fantastic. And I actually had to switch headphones to listen to the 58Xs again after writing that down to tell, like, what's the difference here? Did I not hear that in the other ones? And I actually noticed the echo or the reverb on the 58Xs was more pronounced, but because the soundstage was much more narrow, like the room is smaller, it just didn't stand out in the same way. It was much more special on the 4XXs. So what's the winner here? Once again, most of these are really difficult calls because it's like, what do you listen for? What do you want from these? But I did think the 58Xs are the winners because it was much more crisp and a more intense representation of the song. And also this song is just very raw in production. The way it was produced is meant to be just like straight up rock and roll, intense, gritty. There's not like a crazy level of refinement going on. And the 58X just delivers that straight up. It's what these headphones are meant to do. And it just feels much closer to how the song is likely supposed to be heard, at least to me. The only downside is I wish it had the soundstage of the 4XXs. If it had that, it would have been near perfect. But nevertheless, 58Xs win this particular song. And last up, we have The Wand by the Flaming Lips. And I actually think that song is somewhat similar, at least in production philosophy, to the Rolling Stones. And maybe that's why I was thinking of playing it right after listening to that one. But it's a very raw produced song. But also the Flaming Lips tend to have sort of trippy music with lots of stuff going on. So I think that's always a great, if you're looking for like weird details to come out and to hear, it's a great song to do that with. So first up, 58X, really intense, just like the other songs, and also a great separation of sound. Everything was extremely crisp and clean. And I wrote, well, as clean as heavy fuzz electric guitar can be. But I think if you listen to this particular song, it just, there's something really interesting about it where they have a lot of stuff going on, and then there's just this powerful guitar going off in the back. So the 58Xs brought all those details out really clear, and it made it fun to listen to for that reason. With the 4XXs, when I open that page, a much wider soundstage, as noted before, and it was much more mellow, so the vocals weren't quite as clear. You couldn't separate all the details out quite as well, but it just gave the song a bit more of a trippy vibe to it. It seemed much more expansive and kind of out there, for lack of any better way of explaining that. So those are the main differences between these two pairs of headphones there. And then for the winner here, I decided that the winner was the 58Xs. Just much more clear and detailed. And on that particular song, that difference was fairly huge. The difference in detail was very noticeable between the 58Xs and the 4XXs. And when everything is separated that much more clearly or nicely, I think that this pair of headphones really delivered there where it needed to. So much like on the Rolling Stones song, this particular pair of headphones just delivered closer to how I think that song was meant to be heard. So those are the 5 songs that I decided to review. Feel free to give them a listen if you want to compare against your current headphones to get an idea of like, what are you looking for? What do you want? But for an overall winner, it's sort of like, take your pick. Do you want more crisp and detailed sound? Do you want your music to be more intense? And do you want to hear the songs in a way that's super close to how they were recorded? Then your winner is the 58X. Also somewhat related, it's not as demanding on having a good amp to power your headphones, which is highly recommended for the 4XX, which loves and benefits greatly from clean power. So on this page, I do have an SDAC DAC and amp from Massdrop or Drop as well, which is $150, which is really affordable for quality gear. And basically in a DAC, where this is like a combination of a DAC and an amp, a DAC is like a sound card, except the difference with most DACs, or pretty much all DACs, is that they don't live inside your computer, which means there isn't a bunch of noise, electrical noise from your computer to influence that DAC and hurt the sound. So almost any DAC that's outside of your computer or your laptop is going to be better than whatever's inside. And then with the amp is what powers the headphones, gives the power to the speakers so they can play loud enough. With good headphones, having a good DAC and a good amp are super duper recommended. And you can spend crazy money on DACs and amps. I'll link this one in the description because for $150, it'll get you where you need to go with either pair of these headphones. There are better ones out there, but it's anything audio, super slippery slope. You can spend tens of thousands of dollars on this stuff. If that's your goal in life, up to you. But if you're spending that much on that gear, you're probably not buying either one of these pair of headphones anyways. Anyways, back to the point here. If you prefer music that's more chill and mellow, and yet still has a really exciting energy to it, and if you're willing to pick up a dedicated DAC and amp to bring the headphones to their full potential, and do you want music that's really expansive and vast, so a great soundstage, then the 4XX is your winner. So it's sort of between those two things. Like what do you prefer? What do you find special in the headphones that you buy? There isn't a right or wrong answer. It's just what's right for you. And what's right for me, if I had to pick between these two headphones, I'd pick the 4XXs. Even though it didn't win, so to speak, on more of these songs, it's much more enjoyable for me to listen to these in long periods of time as opposed to the 58Xs, which are just a bit too intense, for lack of a better word. That being said, I'm glad that I own both pairs. They each have their own benefit, but if I'm going to put one on for most of the time, it's probably the 4XXs. If I'm listening to something like classic rock or really raw music, then the 58X is going to out-deliver these, and I might throw that pair on instead. And also the comfort level, the 4XXs are just much more comfortable in my particular head. If I'm listening to something for 8 hours as I work, comfort becomes a bigger issue there, and that's where these, on my particular head, work really great. If you have a smaller head, probably not as big of a deal. But like I said before, they're both really comfortable. That's it for this video. This is a lot of talking for me about two pairs of headphones. So I don't know if this is interesting or not, but if it was interesting, feel free to leave a comment to let me know your thoughts about what you think. And also feel free to hit the thumbs up button to let me know that it was helpful or interesting or whatever the case might be. If you're upset and you, for some reason, listened all the way through while being upset, you can hit the thumbs down button. Let me know about that. But that's it for me. I super appreciate it if you took your time and listened to this whole darn thing of me ranting about headphones. And until the next video, I will talk to you later.